Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm Andy Clarke. I'm the Program Manager for Regional Innovation with Wine Australia, and welcome to this first in a series of 4 webinars. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung people, and also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands of which you're all joining from today. I pay my respect to elders past and present, and extend that respect to celebrate the rich cultural diversity of all First Nations peoples that are joining as well. As I said, this is the first of 4 webinars as part of a series steering your business strategy with sustainability. This particular webinar will focus on the E component of ESG, which is environmental sustainability. So for today, if I'll just... For today's session, the purpose of this webinar is essentially to cover off on a few of these things, and it's to help businesses understand the environmental sustainability and particularly emissions reduction as both a challenge but also an opportunity for how you can drive into things such as market access, efficiency and brand strength as well. We'll be covering off on some of these sustainability focus areas, some big impact actions, look at how we can generate and utilise data and evidence, and then also how we can demonstrate and communicate sustainability effectively. So I guess the question is, why are we focusing on sustainability? And I think this is really pertinent at the moment, given the tough conditions that many in the sector are facing. Sustainability continues to be a business advantage. And it helps with those who not only commit to it, but also communicate sustainability effectively. And by doing that, it actually allows them to not only access more markets, but also identify ways to drive down business costs and also improve their efficiencies within their business. So focusing now on sustainability, we can help producers understand and navigate a rapidly changing global market and also the expectations that come with that. And importantly, hopefully today we'll be able to introduce some cost-saving actions that can also deliver some of these sustainability outcomes as well. Now today we're going to look at several different perspectives across the supply chain to help sort of frame out how that can work for you. We'll look at a major sustainability retailer with Coles Liquor, and we have Shae Courtney joining us to discuss relationship building with wineries, Coles sustainability priorities, and also the need to understand your customer when designing your sustainability strategy. On a regional perspective, we're going to dive into an example of that regional significant movements, helping wineries reduce costs and emissions. We have Kate Morgan joining us from the Margaret River Wine Association to look at some of the benefits and processes of the Margaret River Lightweight Bottle Charter. Looking at data capture and the National Sustainability Program of Sustainable Wine Growing Australia, Suzanne McLoughlin will join us to outline ways in which the Sustainable Wine Growing Australia not only captures data, but then also how that data can be used to demonstrate improvements over time. And lastly, in understanding how small and medium-sized grape and wine businesses can position their businesses for success, choosing the right topics to report on and communicate, and then how to start small and build. Julian Marchant from Wine Australia will provide examples of how some newly developed resources around sustainability strategy and reporting guides and sustainability communications guides can assist in working forward. So essentially how we'll operate, each of these panelists will provide a small presentation for you from their own perspective and see how they are approaching this challenge from a supply chain manner. And after that, we'll delve into some Q&A and panel discussions around that. So please make sure that you put your questions into the chat, and we'll be able to come back and address those later. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Shae to share some of the perspectives from Coles and how we can building sustainability requirements and alignment against some of the targets that they're addressing. Thanks, Shae.
Thanks very much, and great to be here this afternoon, or indeed wherever everyone is joining us. But just want to extend my thanks for the opportunity to present to you this afternoon. I'll take you through a little bit about our strategy at Coles, how it works in terms of our supplier relationships, and ultimately what it's delivered over the last couple of years in terms of our work with suppliers and what they've told us in the Important Advantage survey that we carry out each year. If we go to the next slide, just in the interest of time. So we're very privileged to be the first for sustainability in alcohol retailing for the second year in a row. And I just want to reflect on this for a moment. That's really a major sign of the work that we do with suppliers to improve our relationships and the seamless nature where we identify opportunities in the sustainability world to really spotlight and work on projects that are shared across that sustainability and commercial landscape to bring these to life. But it would be remiss of me not to just flag and highlight how privileged a position this is for us in 2025. On the next slide, if we could, this is really a focus on how we look at sustainability across Coles through climate, nature and circularity. And these three pillars are new for F25 when we released our sustainability report, which I know Julian and the team will circulate a link to after today's webinar, and I encourage everyone to take a look at that report or certain sections of it. But really through climate, nature and circularity, we've sought to simplify sustainability as it develops across our business with a number of key stakeholders, including most importantly our customers and our suppliers. And if you look at tangibly what this means for us as a business, I've just drawn out a couple of excerpts on the next slide across climate, nature and circularity. And so the climate piece is very much focused on our emissions journey. So we started today by focusing on emissions, or alluding to what that emissions requirement is. Really what that means is that when large suppliers work with Coles, we have a commitment that we will require those customers, those suppliers, when they're working with us from a customer perspective, to baseline their scopes 1 and 2 emissions, which are our scope 3 emissions, and that we require that to be carried out by F29, and that 80% of our supplier base by spend will be mapped out by F29, and critically that those suppliers will have set a science-based target. So that's really to mitigate the most significant effects of climate change. But really for the wine sector, what this means is that you may not be in that 80% by spend, and if you haven't had a conversation with us yet, then it probably means that you're not in that 80% by spend, but it's still good business practice to understand your emissions profile, and probably many of you are already doing that with other customers, both here and particularly if you've got customers in Europe and North America. So understanding that emissions profile is really important to Coles, and it's good business practice in any case for your export markets, particularly Europe. On nature, this is very much focused on our forest, land and agriculture and commitment to no deforestation, which is something that will come into the liquor space and into the wine category later in the decade. But most likely at this stage, it's really very much focused on other categories on the grocery side of the business. And then there's that circularity piece. The circularity piece is very much focused on the work that we do with many of our suppliers right across the grocery and liquor businesses at Coles to improve packaging. And we know that packaging is an opportunity, particularly for the wine industry, particularly with glass as one of the more emissions intensive forms of packaging. For our journey, and I'll take you through a bit of the case study on the next slide, we've already made a number of changes to Coles Liquor own brand packaging. And that includes lightweighting of glass, but it also includes the removal of the foil hoods from a number of our private label sparkling lines. That alone in F25, and we only made that change halfway through the last financial year. That change, that removal of hoods on 6 private label wines, resulted in the reduction of material by about 4,000 kilograms, which is quite significant considering how light that part of the packaging is. We've also made some significant strides to reduce glass weight right across our own brand portfolio. In F25, that was about 50% of the portfolio, and we'll complete the balance in F26. And that has allowed us to achieve a 98.7% figure for all primary packaging in our own brand space being recyclable, reusable, or compostable. But realistically for us, that's recyclable, which is a very high number, and one of the highest, if not the highest, in Australian alcohol retailing. So big kudos to the team for achieving that. We'll continue and complete the balance of that exercise in F26. So good opportunity to both deliver an emission saving, to also improve the customer experience, and we've looked at making those changes from a packaging perspective to really improve the customer experience as well as deliver a COGS benefit as well. So that's an opportunity when you're thinking about emissions. There's usually a direct line between emissions intensity and cost. So a good opportunity to consider that, something that we've certainly seen as we've moved through that part of the program. I also wanted to take the opportunity today to share the R-Cubed packaging framework, which is on the next slide. We've had the R-Cubed packaging framework as part of our packaging approach at Coles for a number of years, but we've just updated this to reflect best practice going forward for the next 5 years through to 2030. And so it really now looks at reduce, recycle, and reimagine. And so that's certainly something that we'll do right across both grocery own brand and liquor own brand products. But I wanted to also share it with those on the webinar this afternoon, because it's a good framework to use just in terms of good packaging practice outside of the Coles universe. So I thought that might be a useful resource for those who are looking to really start their packaging journey. Just lastly, each year we open the Coles Nurture Fund to suppliers of Coles, but you don't have to be a supplier of Coles. And that Nurture Fund looks at really driving innovation, growth and sustainability across the food and drink sectors. Last year, we awarded $500,000 to Fowles Wine in Northern Victoria, specifically because they came to us with a great idea to use micro bats in the vineyard to act as a natural predator for pests in the vineyard. And we really liked that idea because it was quite novel and uses some novel technology, and I encourage those who haven't had a look at it to look at it. But really also it helps us meet our biodiversity commitments. And so we thought this was really true innovation in the wine category. And so what we did was say, well, this is really great, and we supported Fowles to make that change, and we're seeing some of the benefits of that pilot play out now. But the important thing is you don't need to be a supplier to Coles. Great if you are, but that Coles Nurture Fund opens in January the 19th. All of the details are available on the Coles website, including eligibility, and there's a turnover threshold. But I thought, considering the audience today, a good opportunity to consider some genuine innovation projects that have a sustainability component to them, ideally. We would love to hear from you, and that's something that we'd certainly encourage you to take a look at. I'll pause there. I know that we've got more presentations, but do think about some questions for the Q&A. I always think that these are more valuable when you get to the discussion part. So please feel free to enter any questions in the Q&A either now or as you think of them, and we'll look forward to having a bit of a discussion at the end. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shae. And I couldn't agree anymore. Put the question through. Really interesting to show just the impact that a small change can have when you're looking at nearly 4 tonne reduction in waste from just removing hoods across your own products. So, following on to the theme of packaging, I might hand over to Kate now to talk about the lightweight bottle initiative that's going on in Margaret River at the moment.
Thanks, Andy. All right, we're up there. And hello, everyone from Woodandi Budja. There we go. Or saltwater people's country over here in Margaret River. We're a biodiversity hotspot, one of 2 in Australia and 36 worldwide. 46% of our region is still covered in remnant bushland, while about 5,800 hectares is covered in vineyard, of which 48% is certified Sustainable Wine Growing Australia and 12% is either certified organic or biodynamic. And all of this is to say that sustainability is very important to our region. So we're pretty small over here, producing about 2% of Australia's crush. We have about 175 wine producers who are crushing an average of 220 tonnes or 219. And about 50% of our producers are under 50 tonnes, so pretty small. So, yes. So why have we gone the lightweight packaging charter? We're originally inspired by the UK-based Sustainable Wine Round Table's bottle weight accord, and this is where we got our 420-gram average bottle weight from, as you'll see in the next slide, I think. And we adopted this weight so it maintains consistency and also allows for some wiggle room where producers might still have some heavier bottles for any reason. Our lightweight glass packaging charter was also designed to align with Wine Australia's emission reduction roadmap, where the increased use of lightweight bottles is one of the key initiatives towards emissions reductions in our industry. But above all, for us, going lightweight is a very simple way to substantially cut emissions of the life cycle of your wine. So you can cut it by up to 35%, which is hugely significant. And overall, it'll save money for the producer, which is especially important for our region right now. And it is also, any business can do it. So this is just a, excuse me, a little snapshot of the packaging charter here. We've included 2 options in our lightweight packaging charter. So the full signatory for producers who are already averaging 420 grams per 750 ml still wine bottle or below. And the statement of intent is there designed for producers that are on their journey but haven't quite made that average yet. We also have designed it to acknowledge the producers that have been using lightweight for longer periods of time. So that's why we have the year that they first went lightweight there. And what I really love about what we're doing with this initiative is that it's accessible to any business, no matter what your size. It's easy to be a part of. And as you can see here, this list encompasses some of our largest producers as well as some of our smallest producers within the region. So we've got a number of tools that we have designed to or made to go alongside our packaging charter to make this process as straightforward and easy and as accessible as possible. Excuse me. So what I have up here is just a screen grab of our calculator. So a producer can use the drop-down menu to select the bottle they're using, pop in the number of units they've used that year, and that will spit out their total weight as well as their average. We also have a fairly comprehensive list of glass with bottle weight, recycled content, country of production, and a link to the specs where available. We've also produced a case study on transitioning to lightweight glass, and we followed the journey, or following the journey, of Julian wines, who are a small family producer in Margaret River who decided to make the shift to reduce their carbon footprint. This is just a quick snapshot of it. To reduce waste, they did a phased shift, whereby their starting point, for instance, for this Sauv Blanc was the Prem Claret at 530 grams. To be able to use existing carton stocks, the first change was down to the NNPB Prem Claret, or lean and green Prem Claret, which was around 410 grams. This first drop represented about a 22% drop in bottle weight. And then finally, when they had exhausted those carton stocks and designed new cartons, we were able to move to the NNPB punted, or lean and green punted claret, which is sitting around the 380 gram mark, which for this one wine, we've dropped 28% of the weight out of that bottle. Unfortunately, due to the significant height difference between the traditional weight Burgundy and the lighter weight, we have to exhaust those cartons with the traditional weight glass before we can move on to the lighter weight ones. But the plan is, as of next year, all the wines should be in lightweight glass. So as you can see here, Julian have started with an average bottle weight of 588 grams. And by the time they get to the end of this financial year, they should be at around 413 grams. So it's about a 30% drop across the board, a 22% cut in carbon emissions, and they will be saving about 8 tonnes a year of glass, which is the weight of a male African elephant, and which, for such a small producer, they're only producing about 4,000 cases a year. This is a massive amount of glass saved. If we could get every producer in Margaret River to have a similar drop, we'd be saving around 6,000 tonnes. And if we go Australia-wide, as an industry, we could be saving well over 250,000 tonnes of glass. So, yeah, that would be incredible. Oh, I've lost my point. There we go. So there is also a cost savings associated with this, which everyone wants right now. And it's estimated by the time Julian make the full transition, they'll be saving about 28% cost in glass per year. There was some cost involved in changing the cartons over, but that kind of gets eaten up by those savings in glass prices. So there's a few sort of broader impact and other benefits that come with making the shift. There's fewer raw materials used in the glass production, meaning it's also increases the percentage of recycled content in the glass we're using. Reduced carbon emissions from transport of both empty glass as well as the final product, which is especially pertinent to us over here in the West, owing to the greater distances. It can give greater access to some of those international markets, such as the Nordics, who are favouring the lightweight glass and alternative packaging. There's a bit of a manual handling savings there, or manual handling benefit there, in dropping about 1.5 or 1 to 1.8 kilos per carton, or 10% from a 12-pack is always handy. We found that consumers really want to buy into this, so if you explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, they want to jump on board and be a part of that. So we found that to be a net positive. And certainly the wine media have been on this bandwagon for quite a while, and there's some who are now saying that they're just not going to write about or review wines in what they say massive heavy bottles. The Hong Kong International Wine and Spirit Competition have launched a lightweight bottle trophy, and here in Margaret River, our wine show, which is being judged right now actually, we launched our sustainability trophy last year. And one of the ways that you qualify for that is to have lightweight glass. So, yeah, that is the long and short of our lightweight glass charter here in Margaret River, and thank you all for your time. And I hope it's given you some food for thought, and feel free to shoot through any questions you might have.
Thanks, Kate. It's a great and pretty compelling numbers behind it, and sort of reasoning as well. Speaking of numbers, I think that's probably a good time to talk about SWAR and sort of how capturing that data and looking at how you can measure the improvements over time is a good time. So I'll hand over to Suzanne now to talk about that. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thanks, Andy, for the introduction. So now that you've heard from Shae and Kate, I thought I'd just refocus the conversation on emissions reporting at the start of the wine supply chain, and specifically what it means for growers and wineries focusing on their sustainability practices as part of participation in the Sustainable Wine Growing Australia program. So just a quick recap on the program itself. So Sustainable Wine Growing Australia is the Australian wine industry's national sustainability program that's been in operation since 2019. We've got over 1,850 national members who are different size business operations with different business complexities, and are located across almost every region in Australia. We've also got different membership types. So we've got vineyards that are members, wineries that are members, and wine businesses that are members. And the program is set up in a two-tier system, if you like. So members start as members to the program, and then they can also become certified members to the program, whereby these businesses successfully complete a third-party audit against a vineyard or winery sustainability standard. The program does have a trust mark, which some of you may have seen before, which is that little logo on the top left-hand corner of the slide. And that is for use on qualifying wines, which aids in national and international recognition of the sustainability program, and also really of a business's demonstration of the importance that they place on sustainability. And at the moment, we've got over 220 million bottle equivalents that bear the trust mark. And that's obviously ever increasing. So in terms of the program, it predominantly covers the winery and vineyard part of the wine supply chain. So at the moment, packaging and transport are currently out of scope. The key annual membership requirements of the program that all businesses do, a submission of various types of data and a workbook. And it's from this data that we can actually calculate emissions and report them back to the businesses. And that is done through the integration of the Australian Wine Carbon Calculator into the back end of the Sustainable Wine Growing Australia program. And that's quite a unique component to this program. And then on the other hand, as I was saying, we've also got a workbook. So the data and the workbook together really provide insights into business practices that explain differences in emissions between the businesses. And the data and the workbook are crucial components for businesses really to provide evidence that both prove and improve their sustainability credentials. And when we undertake certification training for this program, it's really something we hammer home as the core components of certified membership of the program. So in terms of the key focus areas for data capture of the program, really those are focused around emissions that businesses have direct control over. So those are things like fuel, fertilizer use, refrigerants, dry ice, wastewater, etc. And in I guess conjunction with this are the electricity emissions, which are really those emissions produced in the generation of electricity or purchased electricity, and both, I guess, the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions here are those really that businesses have direct control over. And those emissions are generated through the activities that we do report through the workbook and the data. And these are things like refrigeration and, how forklifts are powered in the winery, hot water generation, refrigeration, as well in terms of it might be fuel or it might be electricity. We've also got on the vineyard side things like own machinery use obviously plays a big part in emissions from a vineyard, as well as how irrigation and frost control are powered. So the Sustainable Wine Growing Australia program is set up to facilitate a business to monitor its emissions before it manages them, and this is really crucial. And in terms of helping businesses to do that, they can understand their baseline emissions profile through obtaining, a variety of visual tracking mechanisms. And this can help them monitor their emissions by source over time. And it can also be a useful way that businesses can measure the impacts of changes that they may make to try and reduce emissions. So on the left-hand side here, you can just see a graph of fuel use, fertiliser and electricity use from a vineyard tracked over time. And those emissions, the quantum of the emissions, you can see quite large changes from some years. And that can be a great, proof to a business that the practice changes that they may be making that are driving those emissions are making a real difference. So also the program does provide an ability for businesses to benchmark their emissions against other businesses, and whether that be other businesses that are a similar size or that are located in the same region, or even located in different regions but within the same climatic zone. And this is really just a means of encouraging businesses to compare themselves to others and to help them trigger a review of their internal operational practices as to why they may be quite different to other businesses, and whether there's an ability there to identify mechanisms for improvement. The program also does include a range of mechanisms to showcase practice change. So on the left-hand side here, we've got an example of a business case study. So some improvements that certified businesses have made have been captured through business case studies. And the way that these are laid out is that we've got a problem that's described, we've got various actions that were taken by a business and the results of those actions. And these case studies can provide businesses with ideas for emissions reduction activities. We've also got impact reports. So this is really a mechanism that we use to keep track of whole of program improvements, and they're reported annually through various types of impact reports. And on the right here, we've just got an example fact sheet. We've got various fact sheets that sit behind the workbook in particular as links. And these can also provide businesses with ideas for emissions reduction options against particular emission sources. So just in summary, Sustainable Wine Growing Australia is a program that includes tools that can help businesses to quantify their baseline emissions and then monitor those emissions annually. It also helps businesses benchmark their emissions against other businesses so that they can identify practice changes to reduce emissions from sources that they have direct control over, and then also look to monitor their impact of the choices that they have made to try and reduce these emissions. And lastly, the program definitely has benefits for individual businesses, but also for those businesses along the supply chain who are increasingly required to understand the emissions of their suppliers, or initially at least just that their suppliers are demonstrating commitment to sustainability. And I think that links to what Shae was talking about as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. I think having a tool that's able to practically measure yourself against others and see where you can fit into you're fitting into, and not only just within your own business year on year, but also others in a similar region, I think is really valuable to be able to track that change. We might just change tact a little bit and move to Julian, where I guess we can look at more of a global perspective as to, I guess, some of the other impacts that are leaning into this space, but then also some of the tools that have been developed and guidelines to help assist in doing some of the decision making along this process as well. So I'll hand over to you, Julian.
Thanks, Andy. I am changing tack a little bit from the focus of the discussion so far, and I think there's been some really valuable information provided. My part's really looking at how you report and communicate sustainability, and the way that, if you look across the board, the way that most organisations do this is they set up a sustainability strategy. That strategy incorporates some of their previous achievements, but it really sets out the targets of what they want to achieve over the next 3 to 5 year period. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainability strategy, how to report against those targets within the strategy, and ways to communicate, and some of the tools that we have that support small and medium-sized businesses to do so. So the first step is really finding your why, and I think what we've heard is that there are advantages to demonstrating your commitment to sustainability, but there are even more advantages if you can effectively communicate that. And what we've seen in the last couple of decades is we've moved away from a process-driven system where, through environmental management systems, we were talking primarily about processes. And now we've moved to a system where we're really requiring evidence to show change over time. And that evidence is normally in the form of data, i.e. our carbon emissions were 10,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent at this point in time. And through these actions, we've reduced these to 8,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. So what I wanted to focus on is the topics that we decide to include within a strategy. There are lots of different sustainability topics. They cover environmental, social and governance topics. And the way that an organisation chooses which topics to focus on is called a materiality assessment. And I'll talk about that in a moment, about what that means for businesses, but it essentially helps you prioritise the topics that are of most interest to your customer, which is primarily a retailer or direct to consumer. We're going to talk a little bit about knowing your customer as well, and that's a really important part of this. Shae presented earlier on what's important to Coles. You'll find that the topics that are important to Coles are also important to most retailers. They tend to be very similar. So I'll talk about some of the topics which I've done some work in looking at all the major retailers across the world. And there's some commonalities in the topics that we focus on from a sustainability perspective. There are benefits to grouping topics by focus area within strategy as well. And then using smart goal setting, as in our targets must be measurable, they must be time bound, and we must be able to report on whether we've hit those targets or not. And if we haven't, that's okay. We can talk about perhaps why we haven't achieved those targets. And using data and evidence, as I've touched on, to support any communication that we have within sustainability. So a materiality assessment is simply a prioritisation tool for selecting the topics which are most important and relevant to you as a business. And every business will be slightly different. But as I said, they're going to be influenced by your customer primarily. They're also going to be influenced by legislation. So, and keeping an eye on, depending on which markets you're selling wine into, there are different legislative requirements, and so that may impact you directly. If you're exporting wine, it may also impact your customer or your retailer. So you need to have a good understanding of what these requirements are. And this is all captured through the sustainability reporting guides, which after this webinar, there'll be an email sent out and there'll be a link to that resource. So please have a look at those guides. As an example, this is an example of a national procurement manager for wine, and this is taken from the Sustainability Communications Guide. It shows perhaps Melissa, this is a fictional character, what Melissa cares about from a commercial perspective and a sustainability perspective, and how best to communicate with Melissa, what to say to her, and what are some of the types of data that you can use as evidence, and how you can use that to communicate this through to Melissa. So this is, again, included within the Sustainability Communications Guide. Previously, I mentioned that I did some work looking at all the materiality assessments of major wine retailers across Australia and the world. These are not hidden. They're publicly available. You can Google them. They're found in most organisations' sustainability strategies. And essentially, there are 5 key topics that retailers are really interested in, and they are greenhouse gas emissions, human rights and labour practices, so making sure that those people employed by the grape and wine sector are ensuring that they have their human rights protected, packaging and plastics, water, and nature and biodiversity. And you'll notice that these really weave well with what Shae presented earlier, but there's no point focusing on these issues if we don't report and communicate these in a way that makes sense to the customer, but also using that information to lean into the wine brand as well and help it influence sales. So for all targets, we want them to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. This means knowing what you want to achieve, by when, and by how much. And an example of that is understanding what your baseline is. So you need to go out and have the data and understand what data you do and do not have right now. If you don't have the data, there needs to be systems put in place to capture this data in order to report it over time. And you need to understand what it is now and how likely it is that you can reduce that over time and have a strategy for doing so. Shae talked earlier a little bit about Cole's priorities, but something that he also spoke to me about prior to this workshop was, the need, retailers really want to build relationships with wineries and have those conversations. And if there's things that perhaps a wine business doesn't understand, that's very much a conversation that retailers want to have with wine businesses. And there's really a mutually beneficial arrangement here where both parties benefit. To do that, again, we're moving away from this process-driven, so demonstrating that we have the processes in place to be sustainable, to actually collecting the evidence to prove that we can and we are sustainable. The table on the right-hand side just includes, some of you may have heard of the Australian Sustainability Reporting Standards, and this is a piece of legislation which was enacted at the start of this year, and essentially it includes requirements for Australia's largest businesses to report on emissions, but also to incorporate climate risk as part of and report on this. And the reasons why we do this is because it helps investors understand what are the risks of investing in a particular company, but it also allows companies to be held account for reducing their emissions over time. I'll stop there and allow some time for questions. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Julian. Great to have that sort of higher level perspective on some of the other things that that companies are interested in looking at beyond the environmental aspect as well. Please send your questions through in the chat, and we'll try and address as many as we possibly can. There's a bit of interest. I'm going to hand this to you first, Kate, in regards to, I guess, the integrity of the lightweight bottles, and if there's a higher risk of breakage during transport, and how that's been addressed.
Yeah, my understanding is that they're pretty structurally sound. We haven't found any extra breakages. We funnily enough, initially there was a bit of feedback saying that there'd been more breakages going through Australia Post, and I was like, oh no, okay, all right, let's look further into this. And then about a week later, I get another call going, listen, I've actually gone back through, and it was Julian with their Sauv Blanc, and they're like, we've actually had more breakages with the 2023 Sauv Blanc, which was in the heavier bottles, than we have with the 2024. So it was not a glass problem. It was an Australia Post, I think, because these days they're not doing as much manual handling, much more automated systems, which are just not so gentle on the wine. So they then had to reassess the packaging of the wine, but it certainly wasn't a lightweight glass problem there.
So what does that look like in terms of the packaging adjustments that they've made?
They've got a specific shipper, which is a laydown flat 6-pack, and then with extra cardboard in the sides, which, you know, extra packaging is not ideal anywhere, but it's also not caused by the lightweight glass. So I guess they just are doing what they have to do to get it through the systems it is going through.
Okay, great, thanks, Kate. Shae, from a retailer perspective, obviously there's a appetite to reduce packaging weight and the like as well. Has there been any sort of feedback through on, I guess, preference for lightweight bottles and sort of breakages as well as those sorts of things?
Yeah, no. So we look at that very closely, as you would imagine, from a loss perspective, and when anything we do is measured. And measured again. So there's no issue from our perspective from an integrity standpoint. When you're looking at lightweighting, though, what you need to do if you've got a carton of 6 is also look at marginally increasing or the internal area for the 6 units, because when you take out the thickness of the glass, you'll allow for a little bit of movement in transit, or you'll cause movement in transit. You need to just reshape and realign the internal dimensions of the carton. That's important. But I'd also just say that, you know, Australian producers that have been sending product to Canada for years have been sending it over in lightweight, right? And so, you know, I think it's pretty tried and tested. Have a chat to, you know, your packaging suppliers. They're getting increasingly comfortable with these kinds of requests. You shouldn't have any issue at all. So
taking it from another retail perspective, Julian, in that global landscape as well, what are some of the how do we find out what each retailer might particularly be interested in as a focus of this?
Yeah, so most of these major retailers publicly disclose sustainability strategies, and most of them include a materiality assessment as part of that strategy. So they're very public and forward in stating what their preferences are, and there are a lot of topics which are included within a materiality assessment, but through often they're shown on a graph of what they find most relevant and important for their business, and you can see what their prioritization is, and they state that publicly. So if you know you're trying to sell into a particular market, research that market, have a look at the retailer there and understand exactly what their preferences are and how what you're doing within your business can support their business.
Thanks, Julian. So if we're looking at providing sort of evidence again against sort of supporting what that retailer needs, Suzanne, how does sort of swab data that you're creating at the front end of the production system, the supply chain, how do you provide that going forward to that end retailer?
Well, I guess it would be up to the individual business to both, I guess, track what they're currently doing as a baseline and understand where they are, and then put in place mechanisms to demonstrate, say, reductions in particular aspects. So it could be, water use, fuel use, it could be increase in biodiversity area over time. But I guess, as Julian was saying, having the ability to have a baseline and monitor that over time and be able to have data or evidence to really demonstrate how effective your practices have been, I think will stand you in a really good stead. And yeah, Julian, just saying to understanding the market that you're selling into and what their, particular, I guess, pet areas are really important in terms of being able to really promote and communicate that at the forefront of trying to get into, your particular target market. But yeah, that would obviously be less for, I guess, the grape grower side, but more so for the wineries and working with their distributors, I guess, to formulate that really good communication.
I think an important part there is really sorry to jump in, but I think a really important part is just to have the conversation with your customer. Often, the answer will be, they've got teams like we have in Coles who are subject matter experts in this area, or they'll be able to find the answer for you if they don't immediately know. So have the conversation with your commercial lead within the customer and ask to speak to their sustainability team. And often the answer will be pretty. I think there's this hesitancy sometimes, but where to get started in sustainability. But I think it should start from a conversation. So for our part, we're happy to hear from suppliers, both current and prospective, anytime. We've got a dedicated team to do that, and we can help with data questions. I think plotting where your customer base is across the whole kind of customer book is really important as well, so that you can see the commonality between customers.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think I also wonder. Just as another follow-up for Suzanne on that, sort of what markets are requiring SWA certification or customers, as a different way of framing it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I know Shae was particularly talking about sort of the UK market. That's always been very strong from the sustainability front, and that would, it's probably led that as the sort of largest market for quite a while, but definitely the Nordics and people trying to get into those markets. They have specific tenders that people need to demonstrate aspects of sustainability that align with components of those tenders. So that may be more to do with, lightweighting, as Kate was talking about, or, maybe sort of overarching number of sustainability principles that might be in another area. So, yeah, it's really about knowing what those markets are looking for and tailoring your tenders in areas that, I guess, best highlight your journey through sustainability and where you're at. Probably not every tender, for example, is going to match everybody's business, but yeah, being able to identify what makes you special and being able to communicate that and talk about your journey will help you to be able to align getting products into those particular markets. But definitely I'd say the UK and if we're talking about overseas ones, and the Nordics have been particularly strong. And just going, backing up what Shae was saying too, in discussions we've certainly had with various Nordic markets, they've been very open to, sharing what sustainability aspects they're particularly looking for, when they're looking at products to align with their various tenders as well. So, yeah, I'd definitely say communication is really, really important.
Yeah. Evidence-backed stories they go a long way.
Yeah.
Kate, to you, from a market perspective, the participants that have signed up to the charter in Margaret River, have they discovered that other markets have opened up as a result of being part of this?
Not that I've got specific feedback about. Some of them may have, but we've certainly got a lot of attention of it of late, which is put those brands and that idea of lightweight forefront of mind. But I'm not privy to specific markets or deals or the like. And to be honest, Margaret River, I think only 10% of our production or something is exported because we are so small. So a lot of it was bound for the domestic market anyway. But it's certainly something to keep an ear out for and see if they've had anything specifically happen in those areas.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Julian, I guess just another question for you in regards to what are the drivers and the influences that lead to what might actually influence an individual retailer? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Or I'll say my piece, and then I might pass to Shae. I'm sure he's has a much better perspective than I do. But as discussed during the presentation, there really are. You need to be across the legislation in each of the markets that you're exporting to or you're selling within. There are a lot of changes in sustainability legislation, and particularly around packaging and greenhouse gas emissions. So those are two areas that are emerging. There's also a big piece around nature and proving that a product isn't having a detrimental impact on nature. And that's not just for wine, that's for all products. And then there's this social element, which is very much focused on responsible labour practices and ensuring that those people that support the sector aren't being exploited. And that is a massive reputational risk for any sector. And we've seen cases of that in Italy and France, and that has certainly had a negative impact on their sector. Shae, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think you need to know where you're going to start in this. Where do you want to really focus your efforts in sustainability? Is it product sustainability? Is it energy? Is it you really need to kind of think of, I guess, a few core areas if you're just starting out in this space. I'll share our ethical sourcing policy and our modern slavery piece, which is very much on the S of ESG, and so very useful to take a look at that. But I think at the heart of the conversation today, I think is probably a couple of key takeouts from my perspective anyway. One, seek to understand where your customers are sitting if you haven't already, and then get started with a couple of key areas that and you'll find that your customers are perhaps more willing than you'd expect to help you identify those areas. So a good opportunity there. But I also think it's really understandable.
Great, thanks, Shae. Really good to have that sort of specific insight as well from Coles. I think we've come to the end of our time for today. I'd really like to thank all the participants, the panelists, I should say, for joining us today. Really appreciate and grateful for you to share your insights and thoughts around this and your own experiences. I guess the key thing to take out of this is that emissions reduction is a critical thing for businesses to consider when market access and competitiveness are to be considered as part of your business resilience. There's practical tools, there's frameworks, around SWA, carbon calculators, reporting and communications guides as well that are available, and that can help support your action and improvements within your business, and that it is available for everybody to sort of lean into this and start taking steps to improve business resilience and sort of getting in front of the curve to make sure that you're ensuring you have market access around sustainability programs as well. As I said at the beginning, this is the first part of a 4-part series around steering your business strategy with sustainability. So we will be looking at some other aspects of it as well. The next webinar will be on Wednesday, the 19th of November at 4 p.m. Australian Central Daylight Savings Time. And we'll feature panellists Dr. Peter Stanbury, the Director of Research and Standards with the Sustainable Wine Roundtable, and Dr. Marty Longbottom, the General Manager of Engagement and Sustainability at the AWRI. Additionally, there will be an aligned event around emissions reduction, electrifying your vineyard in Great Western Victoria, incorporating some electric burrow robots, electric mowers and an EVC unit, which will be happening on November the 18th. That'll be included, some details to that in a follow-up email for all participants after this, along with some other links to materials, recording of this session, and there'll also be the slides available on the Wine Australia website for this particular webinar. There was a bit of a challenge with some of the bottom of the slides in the presentation, so we'll make sure that they're available for everybody as well. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for participating, and please register for upcoming sessions. All the best.